Hello and welcome. My name is Jennifer Gates, Field Services Director for the California Preservation Foundation. Thank you for joining today's webinar on historic American landscape surveys. The format for today's webinar will include an hour presentation followed by time for questions and answers. There is a toolbar on the right side of your screen. If you have a question at any time during the presentation, please type it in the box and I will either reply to you or hold the question until the end for the panelists to answer. Please also, at this time, under the Audio tab, select if you are listening through the telephone or speakers. Also, to hide or unhide this toolbar, please click the orange arrow. Today's presentation will be by Chris Patillo. Chris Patillo is the founding partner of PGADesign, a firm of landscape architects in Oakland, California. She and her business partner, Kathy Garrett, past president of California Preservation Foundation, have completed a number of significant cultural landscape projects throughout California, including the documentation of Doyle Drive as it passes through San Francisco Presidio, a National Historic Landmark. Doyle Drive is the largest set of HALS documentation completed in the country. Chris and Kathy are two of the three founders of the Northern California chapter of HALS. Their firm has completed more HALS documentation than any firm in the nation, helping to put California in the lead with 64 completed HALS sites. Chris launched the first nationwide HALS challenge in 2009 and conceived the HALS Heroes Initiative in 2011. Chris has given talks on HALS previously for CPF, AIA, the National Conference of American Society of Landscape Architects, and several other organizations. Thank you for joining us today, Chris.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you for signing up for this webinar, and thank you to CPF for inviting me to give the talk. HALS is definitely my primary passion these days, and so I welcome the chance to talk about HALS whenever the opportunity presents itself. Since we are all sort of anonymously sequestered in our private homes or our offices, I thought I might just start by sharing who else is on the call. Excuse me. There are 24 of us participating today, and fewer than half of them are actually from California, and the rest of you are from a great variety of states throughout the country. We have people here from Texas, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Montana, New Jersey, Kansas, Arizona, Nevada, and Hawaii. And I'm really glad that we have that kind of national reputation, because I think more states need to become actively involved in the HALS program, and I'm hoping that this will be a great way for that to start happening. You have the agenda basically of what I'm going to cover in front of you. I'm going to do a quick HALS, what is it, a very short history. I'll explain the three components of HALS. I'll spend a fair amount of time explaining the difference between the short and the standard format HALS. I also, sort of the core of this talk is intended to be how you can use HALS as mitigation, and then also can be used, and how the HALS documentation is different from other types of documentation. I will conclude my talk with an invitation for you to join our local chapter or encourage you to form your own. So Jennifer didn't mention, but given the logistics of this webinar, we agreed that it would be easiest to wait until the end of my talk to start the questions. And I'm planning to have this run about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, and I want to leave 15 to 20 minutes for your questions, so please jot them down as I am speaking. So let's just go right ahead and get started with that first question. What is HALS? It stands for the Historic American Landscape Survey. It is a federal program, and its purpose is to document our cultural landscapes. It's a program that is administered by the National Park Service in conjunction with ASLA and the Library of Congress. One of the things I also want to make a point of noting, the images that you'll be seeing throughout this PowerPoint show are all projects here in California, things that my office has worked on. And the vast majority of the photographs are ones that I've taken myself. There are a few that were shared with me by Chris Stevens from the National Park Service program that runs the HALS, and I'll try to remember to give credit to Chris when those slides appear before you. So one of the things I want to mention is that HALS is used for either a designed or vernacular landscapes. Examples of a designed landscape would be things like Central Park in New York, wonderful private estates in the South, the parkways designed by Olmsted in the East and emulated elsewhere in the country, or really any landscape that is designed either by a professional or a non-professional. And then a vernacular landscape would include things like, say, a farmstead that has evolved over generations, and all of the things that make up that farm would be a vernacular landscape. Battlefields or other sites where important historic events took place are good examples of vernacular landscapes. The other thing that I want everyone to be clear about is that to do HALS documentation, it should be a cultural landscape, not a natural landscape. So just so we're clear on what a cultural landscape is, to me the simple definition is a landscape that has been touched by the hand of man. And a more formal definition is a geographic area associated with a historic event, activity, or person, or a landscape exhibiting other cultural or aesthetic values. And one last definition that actually came from a cultural geographer, and a definition that I like, it is the human landscape is our unwitting autobiography, reflecting our tastes, our values, our aspirations, and even our fears in tangible and visible form. So, Yosemite National Park and the beautiful features like Half Dome, that's a natural landscape, and it would not qualify for HALS documentation. But Badger Pass ski area, which is pictured here on the bottom, is a designed landscape within Yosemite National Park, and it is suitable for documentation under the HALS program. So HALS is modeled on the HABS program, and the HABS program stands for the Historic American Building Survey, and this is one of the photographs from Chris Stevens in the top here. This is from the HABS collection. President Roosevelt created HABS in 1933 as a program to help put unemployed people back to work during the Great Depression. I keep mentioning this every time I give this talk, and I'm hoping that somehow the message will get to Obama and he will start using HALS to put us underemployed landscape architects back to work, just as Roosevelt had done. Then in 1969, the Historic American Engineering Record was created. What the Park Service realized ultimately, and why these other two programs were created, is initially these buildings were being documented with no context, and literally the drawing would be drawn on an absolutely blank piece of paper, and they realized without showing some of the landscape, it really wasn't telling the whole story. To qualify for HALS documentation, a property also has to have significance. And for those of you who do any kind of cultural landscape work, you're familiar with this term. Significance can mean that the site is associated with a famous person, might have distinctive design characteristics, be the work of a master like an Olmsted, and you can see the rest of the list here of what constitutes significance. So very briefly, the history of HALS. It was created in 2000 by the National Park Service, and between 2000 and 2004, the National Park Service collaborated with ASLA and the Library of Congress to talk about and to create the standards and the guidelines that would be utilized to do HALS documentation. They looked to the guidelines that were available for HABs and HAIR, and they followed that guideline very closely. But landscapes are different than buildings and engineered structures, so there are differences. In March of 2003, ASLA put a call out to all of its state chapters, inviting them to appoint a HALS liaison to represent each state. And it was at that time that my office got involved, and I continue to serve as the liaison for Northern California. And we formed our local HALS chapter in September of 2004. So I've mentioned that basically there are three parties that run the HALS program, and the first one is the National Park Service. They have responsibility for overall administration of the program. They also were responsible for conducting those workshops so that we could agree upon the format and the guidelines. They do select sites for documentation, and every year they bring in student interns, and they have those interns actually do a documentation project. So if there are any young students or young professionals who are looking to gain experience in doing HALS documentation, that is an absolutely wonderful program, and I would encourage you to apply. When others, such as my chapter, actually prepare HALS documents, it is the National Park Service that's responsible for reviewing it to make sure that it is in compliance with the standards. And they also do things, routine things like check copyright. And then ultimately they forward the material on to the Library of Congress. So the second of this tripartite team is the American Society of Landscape Architects. And ASLA has the responsibility of developing lists of sites that would make suitable candidates for HALS documentation. And just sort of as a sidebar, for any of you who are thinking about creating a HALS chapter or in some way becoming more active, this is a really great way to start. Just about everybody knows of historic sites in their state and their area, and starting to create a list of possible candidates is a great way to sort of jump in. The HALS liaisons are also charged with coordinating with the State Historic Preservation offices. And I think that that's a very important responsibility, that the federal and the state are working together, not in conflict. HALS ASLA members are charged with actually doing documentation. The reality, though, from the very beginning and continuing today, unfortunately, there is no funding to get this work done. So the work that has been done to date pretty much has been done by volunteers. And so that has made our progress slower than would be optimal. Another really important responsibility of the liaisons is education, to educate members of the public and representatives of public agencies about this program. And my giving this webinar is actually part of my fulfilling that responsibility. And I think this may be one of the most important things that liaisons should be doing, because it's until public agencies understand the purpose and function of HALS, they won't require it, and sort of a chicken and egg thing. So the third entity is the Library of Congress, and they have the responsibility of receiving the documentation and preserving it. When you have the opportunity to look at the guidelines, you will learn that the materials are all intended to be created in a manner in which they will be preserved for a minimum of 500 years. So the Library of Congress has a great responsibility. They also will make copies of this material and make it available to future researchers. And now, of course, they also provide that material online, and the existing HABS Hair and HALS collection is really a tremendous resource. If you haven't visited the Library of Congress site online, you should definitely do that. So I've mentioned that the HALS program, like HABS, has three components: the historic narrative, the measured drawings, and the archival photographs. And I will warn you, I'm just going to, this is the cover sheet of each of the sets of guidelines. And what I want to warn you about is they're a bit tedious. Each of those documents is roughly 20 pages long, and they go into a lot of detail explaining how to do this documentation. One of the things that you need to keep in mind when you are reviewing the guidelines is you need to remember that the guidelines were written to cover any kind of landscape. And anyone who does landscape work understands that landscape is an incredibly broad entity. And so it might apply to a very small front yard of an important person, or the guidelines might need to apply to a 100-mile long parkway. And so when you're reviewing them for a specific project that you want to document, what you need to do is just keep in mind, okay, of all of these myriad of techniques that could be used, which of them will best illustrate my specific site? So I'm going to move into the next topic, because I want to talk about how does HALS differ from other forms of documentation. I think there is a lot of confusion about this. And I guess the parallel question is, why do we need HALS when we already have cultural landscape reports, cultural landscape inventories? Here in California, we have the state DPR 523 forms. And to me, one of the real values of HALS is I see it as much more flexible. All of those other forms of documenting cultural landscapes are, I would say, formulaic, and that's not a bad thing. I think they actually need to be. Let's take a National Register nomination as an example. By filling out a national registration application, you are filling in data and information in just the exact same way that every other historic landmark has done so. And that enables the reviewers to make appropriate comparisons and to assess the similarities and to assess whether or not your particular site is genuinely worthy of landmark's status. So they need to be formulaic. But HALS is more flexible, and to me that is a great advantage. And one of the ways it's flexible is that they allow partial submissions. And this is the Kaiser Roof Garden. This is in Oakland, and it was designed in the early 60s by Theodore Osmundson. And this is the first site that the California chapter decided that we wanted to do a complete set of HALS documents on. And when we chose this site, and we actually chose two others at the same time, Paul Dolinsky from the HALS program in Washington very generously offered to donate the services of Brian Grogan, who is a HALS photographer. And he sent Brian out here, who photographed all three of the sites that we decided to document. And so for the first year or two, the only portion of the submission that actually went to the Library of Congress were Brian's photographs. So the drawings, when they were complete, and this is actually an example of just one of the drawings that we prepared. This is the existing planting, well, sort of existing conditions showing the planting. It took us, over 2 years to finish the drawings, but when they were complete, we sent those on to Paul, and now if you go to the Library of Congress, you will also find our drawings. The volunteer who accepted the responsibility of doing the historic narrative has completed her research, but she actually hasn't done the write-up. So when that work is complete, it also will be submitted. But even then, after we have finished all three components, 10 years from now, if a student or a professional wants to do additional research, take new photographs, it can be added to the collection. And again, if you visit the Library of Congress site, you'll see exactly what I mean, that material as it's received is added to the collection. Another way that HALS differs is there isn't a rigid 50-year rule. Most of the other methods of documenting, they do expect a site to be a minimum of 50 years old. There are exceptions, but that's the standard. But with HALS, it's much more flexible. And as an example, when we initiated the first HALS challenge, the theme was to document a children's theme park. And we contacted Washington and we said, how old do they need to be? And in that case, the decision was if it were 30 years or older, that would suffice. The fourth bullet point here, HALS is more graphic. All of the forms of documentation, of course, do include varying levels of graphic exhibits and plan drawings and photographs. My sense, though, with HALS, the three components are more equally weighted. I think the HALS program puts much greater emphasis on the graphic component. And I like that. I think it's a good thing. So, here's the last two ways that HALS differs from other forms of documentation, and they're probably the most important. And the first one is permanence. I suspect that everyone on the call today has either produced a fabulous document for some site in your area, or if you are a public agency representative, and we do have some of those with us today, you have commissioned to have this work done. Hours have been put into it, money has been spent to publish this work, and a few copies would be distributed to the local libraries and the state archive. But 50 years from now, the question is, who's going to remember that that work has been done? Similarly, a lot of my colleagues, a good example, they might spend time writing a context statement. And sometimes that information is made publicly accessible, but oftentimes it's sort of held close in because it represents that firm's work, and they possibly want to guard it and not sort of just put it in the public realm. So the fact that with HALS, it's not considered complete until it has been submitted to the Library of Congress, I think that's a very important distinction. When you submit it, you are basically giving it to the nation, and it is there for everyone to utilize. So the last way that HALS is, in my mind, significantly different is that it has two completely different formats. And the next section of my talk is going to focus on those different formats for doing documentation. And I'm basically, from here on, I'm going to be going through 3 different case studies and using those to illustrate what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start with the HALS short format. And the beauty of the HALS short format, it's short. And it's very easy to use. The short format combines all 3 components, historic narrative, measure drawings, and the photography, combines it all into one simple document. Now, you would use a short form if you had a site with local or possibly statewide significance. You might also choose to use the short format if either you were lacking in either time or money. the standard format is really an extensive process, which we'll get to that. But the short format, I have completed them in a day. So they're much less onerous, and yet they do meet the standards. They do still go on to the Library of Congress. They still do become a permanent part of our heritage. So much of the work that our chapter has done, of those 64 sites that we have completed, many of them, most of them, were short forms. So this actually is copies of the first 2 pages of a short form that I recently completed for the Carmel mission in Southern California. And you can see the various components of this. And I just want to sort of give you the picture of how easy this is. I happened to be vacationing in Southern California and just kind of on a lark went to see the mission and ran around taking all kinds of photos. And at the time I thought, well, maybe I will write a blog post about it. And it wasn't until the HALS 2012 challenge was announced, and the theme is to document an American Latino landscape, that I went, aha, I can dig out those photographs and I can document the Carmel mission as my submission for that challenge. And so I went ahead and did a little bit of research online. There was a tremendous amount of information available online. I also did visit the Library of Congress site, and they had quite a bit of information available. You see here at the bottom, I actually used Google Earth to get my measurements, so they're not quite as precise as literally being out in the field with a tape measure, but for the short format, it gives you accurate enough information to convey the overall size of the site and to measure some of the courtyard spaces. On the form here, one of the things they ask for is information about location, and I've simply given the street address. Also, they require GIS points, and that too, you can go to Google Earth and you can get a very precise GIS points there. The next section that is called for, and I noted on the slide before that there is a Word template for this entire form. It was created by National Park Service. It's available on their website. It's at the ASLA website, and it's at our California chapter website. And it's a Word template, very easy to use. They give you prompts so that you know what kind of information they're looking for, and tips on how to fill out the form. Now, the significance statement, I think, is the one thing more than anything else that some people find intimidating, at least us landscape architects. We're typically not historians, and so that's a bit daunting. But in talking with Paul in Washington, he's made it clear that the statement of significance can be as little as 2 sentences. So don't not think about doing a HALS short form because you're worried about statement of significance. The next section is a description of the site, and what I do simply is walk around. I often take a digital tape recorder, and I just make notes about my observations, and then I write a brief description. What is not pictured pictured here, but the next section is a brief history. And again, doing a little online research using a couple of reference books, you can easily get an adequate history of the site that you're working on. And then the last 2 pages of the form, there is a place here for your references on the left and also information about the author. And the last page is this release, so that when you do forward it to NPS, it is released and you are in fact giving them permission to send it on to the Library of Congress. In addition to the text, there's a place at the end of the form to add photographs, and you can add 1 or more photographs. And here again, now these photographs can be digital photographs, and they can be in color, and that is unlike the standards for a standard HALS. Also, each of the photographs needs to have a caption. So that's it. That's all there is to documenting a site using the short format. And once it's complete, all you need to do is email it to the National Park Service, and they will process it. So it really is easy, and I hope I have demystified it enough that you now are already thinking about a site that you would like to document in your state. So let's move on now and talk about the standard format. And again, the 3 components listed here. And one would definitely want to use the standard format if you were looking at a site with national significance. It is, though, important that there is sufficient funding and sufficient time to be able to do a quality job of documenting in the standard format. So the next series of slides, I'm not going to go through every bullet point on this list. What the next few slides are is a very skeletal summary of what you will find when you go to look at the guidelines for doing HALS documents. For the historic reports, they tell you all of the different kinds of information that needs to be included. And again, you can read this list. What are the character defining features? What makes it significant? How has the site evolved? In addition to that, they're expecting you to write about natural features, land use patterns. All of these things are listed. Again, I'll remind you, though, that one does have to use their judgment. There may not be any archaeological features, so obviously you wouldn't write about that. So you look to the guidelines as the prompts of the things that can be included, but they don't necessarily all apply. So for the drawing section, there's just a tremendous list of different types of drawings that may be used to capture the important qualities of your particular site. A location map is a requirement and should appear on the cover sheet. Most likely every site would include existing conditions. It may or may not include period plans, may or may not include detail plans. Sections, elevations, all of the standard types of drawings that landscape architects are used to using, and which of these would be best suited for your particular site. On a large site like this one, this is the Henry Coe State Historic Park in Morgan Hill in California. It is 87,000 acres, and so this site, doing some analysis maps like the one that I'm showing you, where we did a whole series of these maps and we showed how land ownership evolved over a period of years, and it changed from a great number of small ranches to a very small number of very large ranches. And you see these other kinds of drawings that could be used. So similarly with photography, they have a prompt list there of the things that need to be captured within the photographic component. So, the second case study that I want to present to you is the work that our office was involved in doing the HALS documents for Doyle Drive. Doyle Drive traverses through the Presidio at San Francisco. And the Presidio is a National Historic Landmark. So clearly this site warranted the highest level, the most thorough documentation that could be done. Doyle Drive is an elevated roadway that is rated as one of the least safe highways in the nation, and so it is being replaced. And everything within this shaded dark gray area, that is our area of impact. And basically the National Park Service required that HABs, HARE, and HALS be completed for every building, structure, landscape feature that is in that area. You can see that this area, which is 1.2 miles long, is divided up into 9 sub-areas. And just to orient you, the Golden Gate Bridge is off the sheet on the left edge, top left, and the Palace of Fine Arts is at the right-hand edge. So this is what you're seeing in this photograph: the Palace of Fine Arts in the foreground, and the Golden Gate Bridge in the background. So that is our study area. This is a really excellent example of how HALS was used as mitigation to satisfy Section 106 and 110B of the amended National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. And that act, of course, is what drives a lot of this work. So just so everyone who's listening today understands, I'm going to just read a statement about what that act does. It requires federal agencies, or anyone who's working for them, to document historic buildings, structures, sites, and objects that are listed or eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, to mitigate adverse effects of federal actions such as demolition or substantial alterations. So that is why we are doing a lot of this work. Interesting tidbit, Chris Stevens at NPS, he was a great resource giving me some information and guidance on these programs. And one of the interesting things he told me was that currently 1/3 of the HABs HARE HALS collection is mitigation. And there's a part of me that thinks Well, that's a good thing because it means that the NEPA and CEQA legislation is in fact doing what it's designed to do. It is enabling us to capture in a permanent record our cultural heritage. The other side of me thinks, well, that's a bad thing because it does mean that a great number of our historic buildings, structures, and landscapes are being impacted. So, moving on to my case study, I'm going to be talking about each of the three components and what was done under this contract. And I will tell you that there will be a greater emphasis on the measured drawings because that's the work that my office completed and which I have the most familiarity with. But briefly, the historic narrative portion really was, they conducted exhaustive research, and by they, I mean ICF engineers. They were the leader of the team, and they did HABs and HAIR, and they wrote the historic narrative of the HALS documents. They had a complete team of historians who have spent well over a year doing both primary and secondary research on this site, beginning all the way back to prehistory and bringing it all the way up to current day history. And really, they have written about and researched every aspect of this site, both natural and man-made, all of the things that were on that list that I showed you just a moment ago. Very comprehensive, and in the end, their final report for just the historic narrative will run about 400 pages. In talking with the historian, his judgment that the level of detail that ICF went into for the HALS documents was far, far greater than would normally be done for CEQA or NEPA. The most important thing that they address in their research and their writing is to identify what is significant about this particular landscape and why is it significant. So, the next several slides are going to show you exactly what a standard format set of HALS drawings looks like. So this is the second case study, and I'm hoping that once we've gone through this, everyone on the call will have a much clearer sense of what a set of HALS drawings is. So here we go. This is the cover sheet, and it has the standard components. It shows the site, it has the title, it has the location maps. On the left, a very brief summary statement of significance, and then we have the drawing list on the right-hand side. When we started working on this contract, the first thing that we did was the field work to find all of what was existing. We started with a site survey that was provided by the engineers, and you might say, well, if you had a survey, why did you have to go do field work? And the answer to that question is a survey that is done to facilitate the engineering design work is very different from a HALS survey. So even though we had accurate current scaled drawings, we still had 4 people who worked in the field on average 3 to 4 days a week for 3 months. And we were in the field making notations and observations about the historic landscape features that we were finding. We did our field work on sheets that were at 20 scale, and at that scale it took 75 sheets to cover the entire site. And we actually had 2 sets of base sheets that we use to record our observations. And one set we called the hardscape plans, and the drawing that you're looking at now is an example. And on the hardscape plans we recorded things like the roadways, walls, steps, ramps, site furnishings, anything that was hard. And then the second set of sheets were the Softscape plans, and that is where we recorded the trees, the vegetation, and other soft surfaces like bark or gravel or hydromulch. And once we had collected everything, this is a detail of a Softscape plan, we actually drew them in final form at 50 scale. That made them easier to understand, and so it ended up taking 9 sheets of hardscape plans and 9 sheets of softscape plans in the final set of documents. We also prepared over 60 sketches like these to illustrate the various features that we were seeing on the site. You'll notice that these are hand-drawn. Most of our drawings we used AutoCAD, but all of the sketches were done by hand because we felt that the quality of the hand drawings were better at capturing, I don't know, the essence of these details. And you know, this is a very good example. These are drainage swales, and they're gorgeous. They're just beautiful, and they're beautiful in reality, and we wanted to capture that, and there's no possible way we could have captured what these sketches do had we tried to do them in AutoCAD. Okay, one of the things that really was very important about the site was the topography, and for that, we actually decided to collaborate with another landscape architect, Janet Graysick, and we wanted to include Janet on the team because she had been one of Paul's interns, and she had experience documenting the grounds of the White House in Washington. And Janet was part of our 4-person survey crew in the field every day, and Janet also took responsibility for drawing these sections. And if you recall, I made the comment that when you look at the guidelines, you need to think about what drawings will best illustrate what's important about your site. Now, this site, the whole reason it was located where it was is because there was a grade change, and the Presidio was up on top of a bluff where it had excellent views and vantage point out into the San Francisco Bay, so that if enemy ships came into the bay, they would see them. So this really is a perfect example of applying that thinking. The sections here, the topography, how the land met the water was a very important component. So we have 4 sheets of sections. This is another exhibit that we created, and it's a little bit unusual. We call this a composite period plan, and typically, period plans are done in individual sheets, and you would have one for each period of significance. We did have a budget limitation, and we needed to cut back on some of the drawings, and so we made the decision to do it this way. And the key, the legend up in the top right there, you see the different colors. Each of those colors correlates with one of the periods of significance that was identified by the historians. So everything in red, whether it's a building or tree masts, occurred within that period of significance. We had one sheet of isometrics. This is, and there's 4 views of it, you can see. This too was done in AutoCAD. This is one of the batteries. There are several batteries throughout the San Francisco Presidio, and each of them had the guns mounted on those circular rings that you see there in the image. And this is where, the heart of the defense system. So there were also very interesting, very sculptural structures, and really impossible to describe something like this in words, and really even difficult to capture with the photography because they were overgrown with vegetation and they were absolutely covered wall to wall with graffiti. So this really was a very valuable exhibit within the drawing set. Another thing we included, a very simple graphic figure ground plan, which shows buildings in black, vegetation in gray, everything else is white. And it very quickly you understand the density of development within the Presidio. And you can see from this graphic that it's a very lush. There's a lot of gray, a lot of vegetation. We also did 4 sheets of view diagrams. This is the one views that you see from the site looking out. This is a detail. So our site, you can see in the middle, it's a little hard to read, it says Presidio of San Francisco. So that's the site, that little black sliver, and the cones represent the views, and the numbers correlate with these drawings around the sheet, so that number 1 drawing illustrates what you see from that point. We also had 3 sheets of internal views and similar format with the numbered cones and the sketches that illustrate what is visible. Now, this is an exhibit that we hadn't anticipated, and we couldn't have because no one knew this drawing actually existed. But while we were doing our work, the historians were doing their research, and they discovered this 1918 plan of the communication defense system. It shows the locations of all of the batteries and all of the tunnel system that connected the batteries that enabled them to communicate with each other. And so since this was a new discovery that no one else really knew about, we decided to incorporate that original historic drawing into our set of HALS drawings. Now, this is something else that's a little bit irregular, and if you read the HALS guidelines for measured drawings, you will not find anything like this in there. It's actually something that we conceived. We call these typology sheets, and during the course of that field work, I took about 4,700 photographs. And I was just amazed at the number of, in this instance, all the different kinds of light fixtures. And in this one, all the different kinds of stairs and ramps. So we ended up creating 11 of these typology sheets that illustrate all of these various things, site furnishings, etc. In addition to the plan sheets, we had one whole sheet that had a comprehensive plant list and also a comprehensive resource list. So that was the measured drawings component. And then the third component is the photography. Neither of these are Brian's drawings. The official HALS photography is required that it be large format, 4x5 negatives, printed on archival paper that can last 500 years, and black and white. They're limited to black and white photography. And again, the objective of the photography is to record really every aspect from that list that I showed you earlier. Okay, so that describes a standard set of HALS documents. Truly a massive undertaking, but in our mind, appropriate for a site that reflects 147 years of U.S. military history, from pre-Civil War through 2 world wars to Vietnam and beyond. And it's quite an impressive set of documents that once it's been sent to the Library of Congress will be there for future generations. So I'm coming up now. I want to talk a little bit about how should HALS be used, and I think the simple answer is you should use it in much the same way as you would use HABs and hair. And we've just finished talking about how the Doyle Drive project was mitigation to compensate for a loss. And I'm actually going to give you more quickly sort of one more example, and this is the third case study of how we worked on a project that we did HALS as mitigation for a project that was being taken. And this site is in Richmond, California, and it is a site that there used to be, before World War II, about 30 wholesale nurseries, and they were all family run by Japanese families. And most of them are gone, and the Sakai and Oishi nurseries are 2 of only 3 of these nurseries that remain today. During World War II, we all know that the Japanese were forced to leave their homes and their businesses and were sent off to internment camps. And during that time, many of them had friends, mostly Italians, who stepped in and helped, and they kept their businesses going. But many of them began to deteriorate at that point. And over the years, other things, new freeway coming in, causing demolition, so that by 2009, basically all of these nurseries were closed and badly deteriorated from lack of use and vandalism. So the city of Richmond is planning to redevelop these properties for housing, and there's going to be a new park. And in this case, the developer, as part of their mitigation in the environmental document, was required to complete HALS documents. They hired Denise Bradley and Ward Hill to write the historic narrative. Brian Grogan, and did the photography, and my firm was asked to record, to do the measured drawings. And this is one of the drawings that we did. Now, the reason I'm sort of giving you a second case study is I think that this one is probably a more common example in that it's much smaller than the Doyle Drive project. Each of these nurseries had 3 sheets of drawings. One was the cover sheet. Each of them had an existing conditions plan like this one, and then the 3rd sheet was a historic period plan, which is illustrated here. So it was much less expensive and quicker to complete, and a reasonable amount of mitigation that a public agency might ask a developer to do. One of the things that the Park Service asked us to do is to help to somehow capture and document the various systems. And it was really an educational experience for our team. We stood there on site with one of the descendants looking at the complexity of these greenhouses. You can see in the top photo these overhead pipes. There were underground pipes. There were pipes for bringing irrigation water, other pipes for fertilizing, other pipes to apply herbicides. The overhead pipes brought steam heat into them to warm and keep the flowers at a good temperature. In the lower photograph here, you see that big crank handle that was used to open and close the louver windows on the roof so that the hot air could then escape. So it was a very interesting and unique type of cultural landscape, and we, I think, did in fact capture and record all of those systems on our plans. So I put this in through the advocacy that I have personally been doing. I am aware of several other public agencies that have begun to require HALS documentation within their environmental document. And this text came right out of the draft EIR for the Schilling Garden, which is being demolished and will be replaced by a high-rise. And the City of Oakland called for the site to be documented per HALS, and she specifically calls out the 3 components: photography, drawings, historic narrative. One of the things for public agencies to keep in mind when you do require this kind of documentation, you should make sure you also say that it be done by qualified people such as a historic landscape architect or a cultural geographer or a historian with experience in this type of work. And you should probably also give some definition of the minimum amount of documentation that will be required, since that varies a great deal. One of the other ways that HALS can and should be used is for interpretation. This is a plan that our HALS group did for the Olympoli State Historic Park, and this drawing is in fact being utilized by the Friends of the Park in many ways as part of the interpretation to increase people's understanding of the site. possibly as a fundraiser, because a portion of this site has an old Victorian garden, and they do want to rehabilitate and restore that garden, and our plans will show them the way of how to restore it accurately. We are just about to start work on China Camp in San Rafael. Again, it's an existing state historic park, which is on the list of threatened parks to be closed, and we're going to be documenting it to help raise awareness of this site. Another project of ours, this is the Berkeley City Club, we have completed the drawings of this as well, and there the friends of the club are going to be using our drawings as a fundraising tool, and in fact someone has already donated the necessary funds to complete the photography. This is another example where our drawings, this is Piedmont Way in Berkeley. This was started by our volunteer group. They had a friends group that wanted to rehabilitate this landscape, and our drawings helped them secure 2 grants, one of which was used to plant some new trees, and the other was used to hire my firm to actually prepare plans for the rehabilitation. And the most recent thing I've learned in a way that HALS can be used is to increase property values. This is a drawing that one of our members, Kate Bainton, prepared. It is a complete one-sheet HALS documentation of the Fleming Garden in Berkeley, and she actually submitted this for a competition, and she won honorable mention in last year's Holland Prize. But recently the property was sold, and the real estate agent actually included a link in his ad to Kate's drawings, so that was sort of an added feature, an enticement to buy this property. So, as promised, I want to extend an invitation to all of you to join our HALS chapter. We do have quarterly meetings, but for my listeners who are in Texas, we wouldn't expect you to attend our meetings. But if you're interested in starting a HALS chapter in your state, it would be a very good way to get a sense of the sort of things that we are doing. You might also visit our HALS website, which is listed here. It's a very good website, and it provides links to all kinds of things. To join, you can either contact me or you can contact us via our Yahoo group. So I'm going to conclude and open it up for questions. This is my email address, and I'm very happy to answer and respond to questions, so feel free to jot that down. And if you're interested in learning more about California's HALS and cultural landscapes, you might check out my blog, and I've given that to you here. So with that, Jennifer, I'm ready to go live.
Okay. So for our first question we have is, could you explain the cover sheet of the long format example one more time?
Sure. And of course, all of this you will find in the guidelines. There are certain components that do need to appear on that cover sheet. There we are. You have to have the title, and we actually chose to use a historic title block that we found off of another drawing from 1853 or something. Then the two smaller squares, those are location maps. They just show you where the site is located within California and within the San Francisco Bay. On the left-hand side is the statement of significance, and this is just sort of a short summary of what the historians would have written in that 400 pages. The drawing list on the right-hand side is just like a drawing list on any set of plans that you would prepare for traditional drawings. And the one thing I didn't mention previously, the project information in the lower right-hand corner, that text basically gives acknowledgement to all of the parties that were involved in actually preparing the entire set of HALS documents. The title block is a standard title block, and that can be obtained from the website, and that's something that you definitely need to follow very strictly. And also they have standard sheet sizes, standard font sizes, and all of that is in the guidelines, and all of the guidelines are available at NPS or ASLA. Next question.
The next question is in regards to measured drawings. So in regards to that, the measured drawings for standard format, what would you recommend as a minimum type and number of drawings? For example, existing conditions would be an example of a very necessary type of measured drawing.
Yeah, I would say that at a minimum, that may be it. I just showed you the example of Kate's Fleming garden, where the competition stipulated that only one sheet was permitted, that one way or the other you needed to capture the important features of that landscape on a single sheet. And I think Kate did really an amazing job of achieving that. And I'm almost there, she has a plan view, but she also has two sections, which you can see at the top of the sheet and the left. She has her location map in the top left corner. She has a little bit about the tree list, lower left-hand corner, and her statement of significance. It's all there on one sheet. So, but to answer the question, what would I recommend? It really depends on the site. It depends on the budget, critically important, and it depends upon how significant. If it is of local significance, a single sheet might be more than enough, but certainly that would be woefully inadequate for a site with national significance. So it's something that I think the client and whoever they retain to complete the work, they need to have a good discussion about and come to an agreement on. Hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, the next question is, what made you decide HALS rather than HABS for the nursery case study example, which most of the landscape consists of buildings?
Well, you know, that's a really good question, and truthfully, it could have gone either way. And in fact, the historians did do both HALS and HABS for some of the other buildings, not the greenhouses. But I think that there was a lot of discussion about what it should be, and in the end, I think the sense simply was because these were plants, they were growing plants, it was a nursery business, and we were looking at an entire site, not just buildings and structures, and all of those different systems of water and drainage and fertilizer. All of those are really landscape components. And so after much discussion, that's how we got to that decision.
Okay.
Next.
Next is, what training is needed to be a historic landscape architect?
There is a definition of that, and I wish I could tell you exactly where it is. It's kind of secret and hidden away. But basically, you need to be a landscape architect first, and then you have to have had the experience of working under the supervision of other trained professionals on a number of cultural landscapes. And I can try to find that definition and possibly send it out after the webinar is over. But if you do go looking for it, it is somewhere on the National Park site. There's a definition of what constitutes a historic landscape architect.
Next question is, for privately owned projects, is there a standard release form for HALS?
Yes, and it's the same form that I showed that's part of the template. So that same release, whether it's a standard or a short form, can be utilized as a release.
Okay. Is there any more questions from the audience? In the question box is you can go ahead and type in your questions if you have any more.
I have a couple things to add if
Sure,
you want me to use my last couple minutes.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I sort of breezed over, one of the things that our chapter did was we initiated the HALS Heroes Initiative, and we did this to encourage people to do more drawings, and we are actually offering a $1,000 stipend to any qualified professional who completes a one or more pages of HALS drawings per the standards. I also mentioned the challenge, and that we started the program in 2009 with the Theme Park Challenge, and it was so successful the National Park Service decided to adopt this as an ongoing program, and this year's theme is to document an American Latino landscape, and so our chapter is planning to document every one of California's 21 missions. I'm looking for volunteers, so if there's anyone who's interested, please contact me. Also, I just wanted to put it out that, again, if anyone is interested in how do you get started in forming a HALS chapter, or if you don't want to do a group and you just want to tackle something on your own, don't hesitate to contact me, and I'm happy to answer your questions about really any aspect of HALS. And I think pretty much covered everything else.
Okay. There any other questions? There is one request. Chris, was there a slide early in the presentation of the ASLA website?
Oh, there probably is, and I'll just tell you. It's www.asla.org.
Okay.
And then you have to look at the tab, I think it's Advocacy, and you do a pull-down menu, and you'll find Historic Preservation, or just do a search on HALS. And the web address for our chapter is ASLA, well, it's right there, halsca.org.
Okay. Not seeing any more questions. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Later today, you'll receive an email with a link to a survey. We would appreciate any feedback on this webinar and recommendations on future topics. I will also send an email today with a link to today's presentation. And I hope that you all have a good rest of the afternoon. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay.